I am Jim Collison and live from the Gallup campus here in Omaha, Nebraska. This is Gallup's Called to Coach, recorded on November 9th, 2018. This BP10 edition of Called to Coach is a resource for Gallup-trained BP10 coaches and educators who want to help others identify and develop their entrepreneurial talents. We have Gallup experts and independent BP10 coaches share tactics, insights, and strategies to help others maximize the talent of individuals, teams, and organizations around the world. If you have questions during this webcast, and today we're going to be taking your questions, so put them in our chat room, log in. Right below the main video window is our chat room. Choose login, bottom left-hand corner of that box. Choose the guest account. Take the name and number out of there. Put in your name so we know who you are, and then you can also log in with any of the other social media accounts, Facebook, LinkedIn, Google+, any of those. If you want to log in, you can do that as well. If you're listening to the recorded version, or you have any questions about BP10 or its solutions, you can send us an email, coaching@gallup.com. Don't forget to visit the Gallup Strengths Center, just gallupstrengthscenter.com, for all your CliftonStrengths coaching resources and training needs. You can also get all the BP10 resources we have available at the Gallup Strengths Center as well when you log in. If you want to catch all the video in both streaming and downloadable audio for offline listening, you can catch us on our coaches blog, coaching.gallup.com. Todd Johnson, that's his correct name, is our host today. Todd's Gallup's channel leader for entrepreneurship and job creation. Todd, always great to see you. It's been a while since we've been together. Great to have you back.
I'm really excited about today. And I would contend that our record-breaking attendance is because they heard Dr. Badal was with us. That's usually the case. It's a story of my life, and I wouldn't have it any other way. She's going to finish up our session this morning. As you said earlier, and as I want to reiterate, the absolute theme of today is interaction. We're going to update you on a couple exciting things, but the sooner we can go to questions, either during or after Sangeeta and I make some remarks, that would be great. Definitely want some BP10 coach love that the three of us are here. We had a wicked snowstorm this morning. It took me almost 2 hours. Usually takes 15 minutes. The parking lot's empty other than Jim Collison, Dr. Sangeeta Badal, and Todd Johnson, a few others, but wouldn't have missed it. And I know I speak for the three of us. We're excited to be here. Yeah, early snow in Nebraska. That was delightful. It's like everybody forgets how to drive. I almost made an Iowa joke and decided I shouldn't do that publicly.
Don't be bitter, Todd.
Okay, no.
We'll get past it.
No, a couple quick updates, and hopefully we have some of our new coaches. We had a really exciting class in DC. I was unable to attend, but I was getting commentary from coaches and from Jacqueline throughout the 2 days. So there's 12 more of us out there. Really excited about this new cohort, some of their insights on social media, some of the questions. Again, we just keep getting stronger and bigger and better, and it's awesome. I believe we're doing a course in Australia yet this fall, or I guess spring in that case. And then of course we're really going to load up and we'll sell out the courses around the summit in July. And people do take it again. So you're always welcome. We're not going to have as many changes as we might've had in the previous year or so. Might not be as relevant to take it again, but
Todd,
class was great.
Let me make a point really quick on that. Summit dates have changed for just this year. So June 3, 4, 5, I think are those dates. You want to head to CliftonStrengthsSummit.com. If July didn't work for you in the past, this in June would. This may be the year you want to come out to the summit. You mentioned, we haven't announced it yet, but there'll probably be some discounts around BP10 training. Oh, yeah. And I heard from everyone that, man, was it worth it to take training around the summit? So just saying that, you might want to pay attention to what's going on.
The dates are going to line up next to College World Series?
They checked all that. It's in and around those pieces, but we got bumped. There's a really big event going on here in Omaha. We got bumped for this year. We knew that when we started doing this. Most likely next year it'll go back to the July dates, but for now it's June. Just be aware of that.
Oh, good. Okay,
we'll catch July. People where July didn't work. And June will. So come out and join us, get some training done, get that packed in during the summit. So it's coming up.
Awesome. I actually had some email this morning on someone who's trying to come to the course and College World Series. So just spend the month of June in Omaha would be what we kind of recommend.
Wouldn't be a better month.
Not a better place to be. Okay, a couple quick updates. We are working on that landing page for additional resources and videos and the Inc. article, and it's in the works. I probably said this the last update, and I'm sorry. We are working on it. So watch the website because we want a place where we can put, some really strong articles. I try to sound out videos that I get on email, but that's clunky. We're working on a place. Obviously, there's some great material up there now, but I'm hoping within the next weeks we'll be able to announce that we have additional resources, both video and print, up on the website. Not much has changed on the CIRs. I'm not even going to propose a date where they become automated. We're still under the protocol that, we email Christy and we send an invoice, but it seems to be working. I'd say, Jim, we've got about 100 coaches that are utilizing the Coaches Insight report, that scored benchmarking data that we provide. So I'm kind of pulling it out of experimental mode, which we were absolutely in, to see if the coaches used it and liked it. I think a lot of them love it. So I will start pushing for automation so we can move out of the clunkiness of email. But if you're not using the CIR, consider it, and or check in with some of the coaches who are, because I think it's pretty powerful data. Don't use it in groups. That is the one thing we reiterate in class and every chance we get. It's very powerful data that is not best in a group setting. The city models are just plugging along. I've got very clear instruction from our chairman that we want 20 cities in Nebraska giving the assessment to students, not just high school students, but also college. The word studentpreneur is a word. And we're looking for getting the assessment across as many audiences of students, and then running them through that day and a half. I'm sure I've talked about it in the past. It's transformational. Some of the kids in the Lincoln cohort have started companies. There's customers, there's revenue. The buzz is awesome. If anybody from Lincoln hasn't heard of this, then I'll question their authenticity on their Lincolnness, because it's everybody's talking about it. We're aiming at 20 cities across Nebraska, probably have 5 or 6 at some stage of development. So we'll probably need a couple of years to get them all. And then, quite honestly, and we've been doing this with spelling bees for years, right? For maybe decades, but have contests where maybe all the city champion teams come together. The governor's offered to host at the mansion. And then maybe there's a Nebraska champion, and then maybe there's a Midwest regionals. And then, I can absolutely see a day that maybe our winning team pitches at the White House. All kind of futurism, but in the works. I have that blueprint. We have some really great video collateral. So any coach that wants to get something like this going in their city, I think usually there's a university involved. It makes eminent sense for universities to want to look at and engage, the next generation. This is absolutely a recruiting play for a great university who's looking to identify and engage that next generation of builders. So game on there. We've had some interesting strategic conversations with some of our leadership recently, and we really think BP10, switching gears a little bit here, we think BP10 probably really belongs in that transitional life journey stage. We can edit all this up, right? But it, and maybe I can make my point by example, but we're having exciting conversations with the National Football League Association on BP10 incorporating into post NFL, activity and league play. Veterans, we have hundreds of thousands of veterans and our great armed services folks coming out of service. A third go to school, a third work for a company, and a third start a business. So, the impact we could have in that life transitional phase, obviously higher ed. And everybody's familiar with our great CliftonStrengths work in higher ed. A lot of the CliftonStrengths work is in orientation and, getting that strengths foundation as you're starting your educational journey. Maybe BP10 is a great snap-on activity and intervention, if you will, as you're going out to build a life, to build a career. Obviously, and those that know me know I do a lot of this work in the prison system. We've got very exciting projects going on, contracted in Nebraska, where strengths will be foundational on diagnostic and evaluation, D&E, kind of on the input phase of what, let's focus a little bit on what's right with you. And then BP10 being an important part of post-release, kind of rebuilding your life, building a career. But as each of those examples, athletes, veterans, higher ed, they're transitional phases, in life that learning about your strengths to build really fit. So there's increasing push. Many of our coaches who are from higher ed might be being contacted by Mary Claire. We hope it's okay, but we gave Mary Claire on our research team your email. She's doing some really good research around different applications of BP10 in higher ed. And again, I looked at the list and I know everybody on there is very engaged and hopefully will be helpful and welcoming to Mary Claire if and as she reaches out to you. Very exciting that we have a new series coming up. We talked about it last time, but we've got actually some candidates. I'm not going to name them, but Jim's smiling because we have some very exciting, I dare say, celebrity candidates for our webinar series on roles. So we're going to put world famous, the very best of an expert, of a Rainmaker and a Conductor. I'll interview them, which means Sangeeta will give me all the questions, and then I'll try to make sense of them and do my best. But Jim and I will have 3 very special webinars coming up. I think our first will be in December. I dare say the beginning of December. The expert we've identified is probably within a handful of experts within our entire database and the world. So stay tuned for that. We know who it is, but Jim doesn't want me to name him, so I'm dancing the topic.
I want you to jinx it.
And he can edit this out, so he controls the mic. But with that, those are just a couple of things going on. Again, hopefully questions are starting to brew in people's minds or in the chat room. But I wanted to hand it over to Dr. Badal. You all can call her Sangeeta. She likes me to call her Dr. Badal. To really take us deep on the roles. It's new for a lot of folks. We've heard nothing but enthusiasm of switching from style to role. Styles were nice, but not as practical or team building functionality, wasn't quite there. So Dr. Badal is going to, again, take us deep for a few minutes on the roles and then also update you on some new curriculum that's developing. So with that, I will pass the literal and proverbial mic to my best friend at work, Dr. Badal. Sangeeta, you're up.
Thank you, Todd. And it's so nice to be here again. Jim, thanks for the invitation, for having me be part of the call to coach today. Well, so let's start with why and how we developed the roles. In our work with the founding teams, we found that builders all have different types of profiles. Initially, of course, as you all know, most of the startups start with people reaching out to their friends and colleagues and family, and a couple of people get together and start something. Everyone is doing whatever needs to be done on a day-to-day basis. So there's really no big role definition or clarification of what someone should be focused on. But then as the venture begins to gain traction, role definition becomes really essential. And one of the things that we found in our conversations with the founding teams was that they were not very clear on how to accomplish that particular aspect of their team work or the divvying up the tasks, so to speak. So there were team members who were focused on sales, but then were also looking at the customer. They were also playing a role in product development, and people who were focused primarily on product development were also doing some of the other things. And at that point, who does what on the team really needs more definition. And so Gallup developed indicators of 3 critical roles that we identified from our conversations with these startup teams. These, of course, are the 3 roles that you now see on the report. The Rainmaker, Conductor, and Expert are the 3 roles. One thing that we often get asked about is how do they map to the team? So I'm going to address that right up front. We do not actually have a one-on-one mapping between the roles and the themes. And here's why. We went to the item level to create the indicators because that was the best way to really capture the sense of the role that we were trying to create here. So, for instance, Rainmaker has items from just about every theme, but what is how it is built is that there are certain themes that contribute more to the Rainmaker, and those themes are distinctly different from the other themes that contribute more items to the expert or the conductor. So let me quickly go through that. For instance, the expert role, majority of the items, or I would say more than 50% of the items, are coming from disruptor, determination, and risk. And risk is a little odd one here, but it is tapping into the part of the risk where when someone is working on a new product or a service, there is an inherent risk in whether that will be something that the customers will adopt easily, whether it'll do well in the market, etc. And so there is that risk component that the expert is always concerned about, of whatever he or she is creating, what kind of reception that product or service will get in the market. But if you move over to Rainmaker, again, all 10 contribute to the indicator that is identifies the Rainmaker. But the themes that stand out or contribute more than 50% of the items to the indicator are profitability, risk, and relationship. Risk here is a different kind of risk in terms of the growth strategies that have to come up, the risk of being in an ecosystem that might be new for a product or service, or a product or service that has too many competitors in the market, etc. So slightly different risk, but still, this is one of the key themes that contributes to Rainmaker. And then we have the conductor and the themes that contribute the most. Again, all 10 are represented, but the most are delegator, as you would expect, independence, as well as relationship. So, for those of you who are familiar with the definitions, this might not, what I'm going to say now might not be something new, but I'm just going to reiterate in really very brief terms the definition of each role, just to clarify it for some of our listeners today who may not be as familiar with the roles. The Rainmaker individuals who are identified as Rainmakers have a very high focus on sales and revenue generation. They are extremely oriented towards thinking about the future, about the growth of the business. Very, very persuasive. This is the promoter part of their personalities, where they want to constantly be talking about their business and promoting it and being the best spokesperson for the business. They also have very high relationship quotient, so they really know how to not only build relationships with different stakeholders that can be helpful to their business, but also to leverage those relationships for the benefit of the business. And then you have the conductor. These individuals tend to have really high management talent, just amazing management talent. It's like herding cats, and this person would be the best herder of cats. And they also know how to position talent in the right role, so they know the right fit for an individual working for them. And that, of course, leads to not only employee engagement, but lower turnover, higher satisfaction, job satisfaction, etc., for the employees who work for them. Uh, Master delegators, they know that they can't do it all. They don't want to do it all. They know who to tap into among their employee base to make things happen. And then, of course, they are the ones who make things happen. There is no obstacle, no hurdle that they won't jump over to deliver what has been promised to the client. And that makes them a super conductor who can think about not only making sure that the business is running really, really smoothly right now, but also in terms of how do we constantly build efficiencies into the system, into the processes, so that we are thinking about that next step growth and thinking about how to take the business to the next level. And then you have the expert. Now, this is an individual focused on product development 99.9% of the times, extremely self reliant. These are very highly independent individuals who like to work alone, do not like to be micromanaged, very high bar. They set the high bar for themselves for what they are building. And they are extremely persistent in terms of churning out things that are going to be needed by the market or the customers. They're also kind of part artist and part scientist. So they're extremely creative, but also they are very science based, and so they are good researchers who are going to use the scientific method to build something, put it out there, experiment with it, gather data, learn from it, make changes or pivot, whatever happens to be the case. So those are really broad outlines of each of these roles. And of course, any one of them can start a business. Probably Rainmaker is more likely to start a business and then the conductor or the expert. But you do have some very successful businesses that have been started by either of these roles. The key is then to find a partner who can take care of some of the needs of the role or the demands of the role that the individual, him or herself, cannot take care of. And so I think in terms of how the coaches can use it, we will what I would recommend, or what we recommend, is that consider this as an indicator of the potential role the individual can play on a team. However, it is really possible that an individual might be a hybrid of these roles. So there could be a person who's Rainmaker conductor, or an expert conductor, or a Rainmaker expert. It's very possible that that's the case. Sometimes the individual is a very clear one or the other, and sometimes the scores are pretty close to each other, where they could be one or the other, or could be a combination of those. If that is the case, if you hear someone say that, my role came up as Rainmaker, but I don't really I've never really thought of myself as a Rainmaker. I really like to work independently and I'm more of an expert. Then I think he or she should continue to explore that role, and or whatever role they most identify with. And I think we are eventually going to get to a place where the report will become more nuanced, and we will start making it more customized to the individual, where we might get to a point where we can say, you're a clear Rainmaker, but maybe you're more Rainmaker conductor, or so on and so forth. But for now, I think for the coaches, my advice would be to consider it as a potential, advise them on the fit. However, let them figure out if that's the role that he or she wants to play. We do have some resources available for the coaches. So the book, of course, has a chapter on team building, which is where I think the roles come in really handy. You can use it with an existing team, which means that if there is already teams that are on the ground, they're working within a startup or in any other organization. I think at that point you can use roles to get better role alignment between the members. You can identify gaps on the team. You can help them hire new people, new members who might fill in those gaps based on the profiles of the existing team members. And if the teams do not exist yet, then this particular tool that is embedded within the BP10 is really, really good to form new teams. So we, for instance, have used these roles to create teams, not only in all our projects that we are doing, that Todd was just talking about, with high schools, with colleges, with the very, very early startups, early stage startups, where the role definition, like I had mentioned before, which is where this all started, hasn't yet happened. And so the coaches can utilize it in either situation, with existing teams or in terms of forming new teams. There is also a team template on the Gallup website, which also could be utilized as a tool to helps the team come together, whether it's a new or an existing team, and then walk through what are some of the ways that in which that knowledge about what is the best fit for my role can be most helpful. And last of all, I don't want to be talking throughout this time that we have together. I'll just give a little update on a new online learning tool that we are working on. primarily the purpose of that online learning module, it's a self-learning module. So the purpose was that individuals who take the assessment can actually make sense of their report. So of course they get the customized paper report or online as a PDF, but how do we help the individual make that connection between here is what my talents are as per the report and what do I do with it? How do I make sense of it? And so it's an extremely interactive learning module. It'll be short, 15 to 20 minutes end to end. However, there are branches that we have embedded within that short module, which can allow the individual to pursue or go down a particular route if he or she wants to gather more information or detailed information about that particular aspect that is being talked about on in that module. I think the benefit of that to our listeners, and I'm assuming most of them are coaching and mentoring and advising others, is that this opens up your time to really be the mentor and advisor and take them much deeper in terms of their actual business problems and what they want to accomplish, goals they want to accomplish, and leave the learning piece, the basic learning piece, and getting acquainted with the whole philosophy of talent and getting up to speed of what these talents mean and how to use them onto that learning module. So I think this you hopefully will find it really, really useful. Um, Todd, we don't really have, I don't think Todd will let you know when we are ready to release it, but I think it could be as early as first quarter of 2019. I think that's what our goal is. So with that, I hand it back to Jim and Todd. And if you have any questions, then let's get on with that.
Sangeeta, we do have a couple questions. Mike was asking, and I know you kind of addressed this in saying we don't have a direct mapping from themes to roles. But so Mike is asking this question: how, what are the three talents that best match with expert, so to speak? Mm-hmm. How do we approach that, or how should we approach that? Because if we don't have direct mappings and we've got these talents and these roles, and people are going to try to make those connections, mm-hmm. What's your advice to people on how do we have that conversation?
I think, as I said before, we don't really have a one-on-one map between the theme and the roles, because the roles were not built on a thematic basis. The reason for that is that themes are multidimensional. There are many different facets to, for instance, the theme of risk taking. And I did address that a little bit when I was talking about how risk not only contributes many of the items to the expert role, it's one of the main themes that's contributing items to the expert role, but it also is even more powerful in the Rainmaker role. And so that's where different facets of risk are manifesting themselves into the roles that individuals play on a team. I think the best way to deal with it is not to think of it in terms of the themes, but more in terms of the aggregate of behaviors that are listed on the definition of each of these roles. So when we talk about Rainmaker, if you start looking at the definition, which does come up actually on the report, and of course there is a little bit more maybe in the book. You start seeing those phrases that talk about very specific behaviors that are attached to each role. So money making opportunity, master promoter, profitability, perceive potential threats positively, manages risks analytically. These are all behaviors that Rainmakers are going to exhibit. Now, of course, these are also related to themes, because these are the same items that make up those themes as well as these roles. But these roles we have, because they are derived from different themes, we've tried to pick the behaviors that predict success, which is performance. So these are all tied to the actual performance of the individual in each of these roles. So for Rainmaker, the sales numbers that we had were driving what items we need to pick, because these are empirically built, just like the assessment. So there are items across the board from all themes, but they are very, very specific to the outcome that we expect of a rainmaker. And so I would say focus on the behaviors, not so much on the themes. However, for your reference, I did give you the top three in each. And for expert, I can say that again to your question. It is determination, disruptor, and risk. Those are the three main contributors, which is more than 50% of the items of this indicator are coming from these three.
So I have a question.
Sorry.
Have you looked, I think you did with the Inc. study, but of the, call it 200,000 completes we have since November 20th of 2015, because that's when we changed the assessment. And by the way, anybody that took it before that, the computer cannot calculate your role. Unfortunately, you have to take it again. And our help desk is really good if you get messed up with accounts and emails and things, because we've run into that issue. But the computer should update if you've taken it since. How many of each do we have? I think I know the answer, but I want to hear you say it. What is the database breakout of the couple 100,000 that have completed since that November 20th?
It's almost very clearly a third each. So
did that surprise you?
No, not really, because we're talking about having three key talents across a nationally representative sample. And I would expect that the prevalence of these three different, very distinct and different talents should be equally represented in the population. So it wasn't surprising. But again, then when we looked at the Inc. sample, so these are Inc. 500, and of course, as most of you know, highly accomplished entrepreneurs. These are the future stars of the U.S. economy. Basically, growth is anywhere from about 1,500 to 2,000%. That's how fast growing these companies are. And when we looked at the distribution of roles in that sample, it was of course slightly different. So 50%, actually 49%, close to 50% of the Inc. 500 were rainmakers.
Yeah.
And 32%, the next next most prevalent was 32% conductors, and then only 19% experts. And that's not surprising. When you're thinking about super, super high growth entrepreneurs, it's not surprising that rainmakers traditionally take a lead in terms of starting businesses. I did say that even when I was talking about the definition of the roles, we would expect rainmakers to start more businesses, but that doesn't mean that others don't. I mean, obviously, with the Inc. 500, 32% of them, of those leaders are conductors, and 19% are experts. So there are people who can start businesses irrespective of what role, but rainmakers, probably because of the inherent talent that they have in terms of the risk taking, in terms of the determination, in terms of the money piece, the focus on profitability, they're much more likely to start businesses that are high growth.
Thanks.
Todd, Sangeeta, for both of you, Sangeeta, I'll have you go first on this. Is I'm listening to you talk through roles, I'm reminded of this small little product that we have called CliftonStrengths that has these domains. And lots of times there's confusion where we have people going right to the domain and locking themselves in based on a domain definition, where again, we have themes that can cross these domains that have special nuances in that. Is your recommendation, as we're coaching through this, to caution on these roles a little bit, to say the report is much deeper than just a summary of I'm a rainmaker, because I might have 3 rainmakers. John was telling a story in the chat room here where he has a friend who went through the course as well. They had 3 rainmakers on a team. That could, that's like saying we only have strategic thinking. We don't actually have any executing, so we can't do anything. Can you kind of address that from a BP10 perspective as well, Sangeeta, and then Todd, I'll throw it to you as well.
Absolutely. I think you make some really good points here. I think number one, we should take it as an indicator. So for the coaches, my advice would be to use roles as an indicator of the fit of the individual on a team, but it's not the be all and end all. No. We did talk about hybridized individuals with hybridized roles, people who could be a little one and a little other, or maybe a little more one and a little less other, but more hybrid. There's also, remember, this is the potential. So what we are measuring here is the potential for someone to be a good fit for on a team. Um, if you only have all three rainmakers, then yes, you do need the conductor and the expert. And whether you pick it up from your employees, from someone who's supporting the business from outside, or your board member, if you have a board, your advisors, anyone can fill that role in. But you do need to make sure that those aspects of the job are also taken care of on the team. And of course, one individual can't have all those. Just like we say, not everyone can have all 10 teams on a very high level. But even if someone does, those rare, exceptional individuals who do have the presence of talent across all 10 teams just do not have the time in the day to take care of all the tasks that have to be done. And so I think consider these as potential, consider it the role as an indicator, um, focus on the behaviors, and make sure that you stay focused on those 10 themes, which are much more telling in terms of the behaviors that the individual will exhibit, which will lead to the outcomes you're after.
Todd, would you add
Awesome.
anything to that?
Yeah, I would only add, and if we ever contradict each other, listen to Sangeeta first. But I was asked the other day why we don't have role scores on the Coach's Insight Report. I thought that was a provocative question. I hadn't heard it yet. And I said definitively not, never, we'll never do that. And I kind of talked my way through it live with a client, which might be dangerous, but it's so much about the conversation and not getting hung up on the algorithm or the number. And that's, I think, ultimately the power of the entire assessment. And I don't want that to contradict the value of the Coach's Insight Report, but the conversation around what it means in that specific setting should absolutely trump whether it's a 47 or a 52. I mean, I think we lose track if we get caught up in trying to dissect, or figure out how Gallup derived the answer when the real value is in what it means in that business, in that setting. I don't know if I'm making any sense there, but the power of those roles is in the conversations that ensue, not the score or the specific items that make up that role.
Yeah, I agree.
We confuse people when we had styles and we had those talents next to them. I guarantee you we confused the market, and we had conversations going that were of no value to the business, but they were trying to dissect how come I have high here and low here. And there's a numeric answer to it, but it takes you 15 minutes to get there. And it's 15 minutes that was off focus, out of, off ultimate objective of helping that business grow.
Yeah.
Sorry, Sangeeta.
No, I agree. I agree with Todd. I think that's a really important and valid point. The only thing I would say, and I've said this before too, is that it would be possible for us to give a more nuanced representation of the role. So maybe we don't need to give out scores if that isn't any value. It doesn't add any value. But what we could talk about is, on a continuum, where is the individual likely to be placed? Is it more towards the rainmaker? Is it more towards the expert? Is it somewhere in between those two roles? So that gives a person a little bit of a better information in terms of the focus. Now, the book does have an example of a real team that we have worked with, where we had 2 rainmakers and 1 expert. And so I would really highly recommend people to read through it like a case study, and also look for the advice that Gallup actually gave that team of how to round themselves out, and what were some of the very specific business issues that particular team was dealing with, and what made sense for them in how they understood those roles and what they did with it. So I would recommend that if you get an opportunity, please do read that.
And a good reminder, on the strength side, we spend a lot of time on the name it, claim it, and aim it. And if the labels don't define us, we define those labels in the context in which we're using them. And so don't let people get locked in just from the report. If we're doing that, we're making a mistake. These are tools and ideas and concepts that help us have, Todd, excuse me, you said this a second ago, to help us have those conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're having this, let me tie that into this question here, because I think this can be a dangerous one. And Todd, I'm going to throw it to you. John asks out in the chat room, since BP10 was developed from a study of entrepreneurs, what limitations, if any, do you see using the assessment with individuals who are more interested in becoming more effective in business rather than starting a business?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question and insight. That's the whole shift from entrepreneur to builder. We very much believe, we obviously love and celebrate entrepreneurs and what that means in its purest sense. We think it's been bastardized a little bit into, the unicorn chase and the tight jeans in the Silicon Valley. You guys have heard me talk about that before. But building is a much more inclusive. Who's not building something? I mean, the three of us, Jim has built different channels of relationship with coaches. Sangeeta and I are building a practice area, a science account. Are we entrepreneurs? Probably not. Certainly not as the street would define us. But we're building. So maybe if I'm understanding the question, the renaming and repositioning around building, not entrepreneur, was very thoughtful and strategic. And again, it works everywhere in the world except Britain, where we've had trouble with the connotation of construction worker. But and that's not everyone in Britain. That's just a few people that got mad at me. But a current business person, a current employee, I mean, we're kind of just, and it says this in the book, and I really love the line, we're all builders. We're not probably all entrepreneurs as defined, or at least as starting up, et cetera. But that was, I think, a very exciting change we made. It's quite honestly, it manifests itself in our revenue and in the growth of our practice, because now we're much more inclusive to all business. Because if they're not trying to build, they're going broke.
Yeah, I 100% agree with what Todd said. I would just add that, yes, this BP10 was definitely built empirically by studying existing entrepreneurs, so people who had actually started their own businesses. But the criteria for the reason for that is because we want to capture the entrepreneurial thinking process. And that entrepreneurial thinking process can be utilized by any individual working for any employer, or doing their own or building something of their own, irrespective of the structure in which that individual is situated. The entrepreneurial thinking piece is what we are after.
Yeah.
And so we are taking the exact same science into the Fortune 500 now, and other companies, maybe not as large as Fortune 500, but somewhere on that scale, where there is a need to continuously think about where our next growth is going to come from. And when you have that problem, which all companies do, then you do need to figure out how to make your employees think more entrepreneurially. And that's where this builder science comes into play, where we plug in really beautifully in identifying the behaviors that would allow employees to think more like an entrepreneur. And many of you probably know, in existing companies have, and maybe you are people who are advising those companies and coaching and mentoring them to be more entrepreneurial, where they have adopted the practices of and the processes that the startups use, hoping that transplanting those methods and methodologies into their environment would make them more entrepreneurial. I think they forget that the piece that really makes them entrepreneurial is their human piece.
Yeah.
It's the individuals, it's the people who are working in those settings, who have to think like an entrepreneur for that growth to happen, for those processes and those methodologies that they have copied from the startup world to be more useful and more productive. And so in that sense, then BB10 is definitely an excellent fit in that environment too.
We just had this email with some friends in Europe on a big insurance company. Every single Fortune, I'm just going to be bold and probably wrong, but every single Fortune 500 company has a 3-day hackathon. They have a startup contest. Yep. They have, a retreat where you focus on new product and sticky boards and methodologies. And to your point, none are predicated on what we think is probably the most important part is the people that are involved in those. So we're trying to take this student model, this day and a half, lay the assessment out, day and a half. We're actually experimenting that same thing within some big companies where we would literally do the day and a half intervention based on talent, infusing the talent into the conversation, but not within a bunch of school kids, but within a bunch of employees within a company. Yeah. It'll be a while before we can report out on that, but it conceptually makes a lot of sense. Innovation, we'll have to have a whole nother webinar to get into that topic and what it means and who it is. But we really believe that the human piece of the equation is yet to be fully fleshed out. And obviously that's what Gallup does pretty well.
Unofficially in the next book, Born to Build 2, which it's unofficial, by the way. I'm not saying we're writing that, but in that book, there's going to be a case study of me. Because I was a little disgruntled. I didn't make the first book, just to be honest. But with my talents of determination, selling, knowledge, and disruptor, I am the perfect example of Todd, what you were talking about of the idea of I'm not necessarily an entrepreneur, but I'm an internal builder, right? Intrapreneur, I think, is some of the terms we've thrown around a little bit. And you and I were just having a conversation, John, and asked kind of how we use this at Gallup internally, right? And right before the show, you and I was saying, Todd, I use my number one determination in the strengths community because I don't give up. Like I just keep going. Like it's hard to stop me. I'm going to outlast everybody. I'm going to be there longer than anybody. I'm going to stay later than everybody. It becomes for me, but I don't have any interest of going out and doing that on my own. Right. That is something, the selling, right. The influencing that comes from maybe the CliftonStrengths side a little bit. The selling number 2 allows me to want to continue to influence and sell product outside of what I'm doing. Right. It's a perfect example. We run our interns through this program as well. Every high school intern that comes in and college intern that comes in through Gallup runs through the assessment, and we spend time thinking about that. That's actually, for our high school team this year, that's actually part 2 of our internship. So in the spring, we will have them run through BP10 and do some things with them as we work on that with them. So that's kind of how we're using that. We are using that internally. I do have Mike is asking, Todd, there's a number, and I think this is a Department of Labor number. I don't think we keep this, but 400,000 businesses being closed down or every year, and only 40,000 being created. 400,000 being built, 470,000 are closing down. Is that stat still correct?
It's a couple years old, and that's one of the problems with a lot of the government data is it's a couple years old. Those lines historically since they measured it for 50 years, we would open 100,000 more than we'd close. I'm grossly oversimplifying. About, 5 or 7 years ago, the lines crossed. Nobody talked about it. We jumped up and down, and then some friends at over Brookings and a few others kind of got on it as well. There's an internal debate over who saw it first. They've crossed back, and Sangeeta is going to correct all this, so listen to her more. But they clearly, for a couple 3 years, we were shutting down more than we were opening. They're just bouncing on each other right now. Again, 2 years in a lag, but the numbers are about right. 450,000 open and close. They're bouncing. When you talk about firms, you get really tricky because some people count, some people count patents and, we created, 50 million companies last year. Well, maybe we registered 50 million patents, but we certainly didn't create that many firms with employees. Sangeeta, fix that, please.
I think you're right. We have uncrossed, so we do have more births now than the deaths. However, to the point of the numbers, it is, I think we have the 2016 data is the latest one that we've just looked at. That was recently released about a month ago, and 433,000 businesses, and these are employer businesses, so at least with one employee, that were born in 2016. 433,000 born, and 399,923. So
okay, she can't be making that up. I would have made that up. She's reading from something.
400,000 businesses have died. So we are barely about 33,000 above, but at least births are now, a little bit more than
One of
deaths.
the related topics, and I'll be quiet then, is, the student debt problem. We've got, what, $1 trillion of student debt. It's really hard to start a business when you come out with $300,000 of debt and a monthly nut that you've got to cover. So there's a lot of really smart people who are writing and throwing flags saying, hey, if we don't get control of this student debt issue, and our culture, of course, mandates that you get a 4-year, very expensive degree to be called successful, which you can tell by the way I frame that up. I think it's wrong. But that's a kind of a leading indicator that could be a big problem, because that student debt issue wasn't that albatross 50 years ago when this place was surging.
Todd, in 2 minutes, there's a question about CIR and selection. And I know we've covered this in previous webcasts that we've done around this. And I want to, we need to be really careful. And maybe we can't cover it in 2 minutes, but can they use the CIR as a selection tool, or should they? Okay.
That was less than 2 minutes.
Nice. Sangeeta, you want to add anything to that?
I'm sorry, what did Todd say?
CIR is a selection tool. Todd said yes.
Okay. So yes, I would agree. Can you
as a
use it?
piece of an application, as a piece of an interview, it absolutely definitively should not be the only data, but we built it. Sangeeta's team had decades of experience around selection research, a really big part of Gallup, where we study the best in a given role. We do, meta-analysis and content analysis and qualitative data, and then we ultimately derive at what success and excellence looks like, and then we build discriminating items. And I mean, all those core tenets to selection research, which Gallup's been in that business since 1965, went into the building of BP10. And of course, as many know that were with us in the beginning, we kind of put our foot in that water by giving a cover page to the top 2% of those that took the assessment. Oh my gosh, I'll never forget the class where one person in the class had the cover page and the chemistry was ruined for 2 days. And if anybody was on that, they'll remember that. And I'm sure the person that has that cover page still has it on their refrigerator. The first report had dominant, contributing, supporting. We thought it was a great idea. That kind of backfired in the culture of which we live. And so now the new movement positioning, everybody has builder talent. The new report, lends itself to that science of know what your top is, play the ball where it lies, but then we give you, the coaches, that special insight. And I mean, these student projects, we give the assessment to 3,000 kids and 400 get invited. And I'll tell you point blank, I've been involved in a whole lot of them. I have never heard from one parent saying, how come Johnny got selected and Sally didn't? And oh, by the way, go over to the athletic department and say, how come everybody can't play quarterback on the football team, the varsity football team? Nobody ever asked that question. Everybody knows why. Because Bobby or Sally or Johnny or Susie is the best at that. And that's why they get the coaching and the development and the scholarships and et cetera. So it really kind of fascinates me that in the student world, in the jungle that we know as our society and culture, we have no problem lining up the athletes and no problem lining up the intellects. How come everybody doesn't get a national merit scholarship and a free ride to Princeton or Harvard? Well, because they don't deserve it and they're not wired that way. That's why nobody asks that question, but they do when we come in and start saying you have more talent to build than maybe somebody sitting next to you. It's fascinating. So we're going to change it.
I like it. One quick technical question. Languages BP10 is available in today to take the assessment in, and any future things coming along those lines?
Yeah, the Strength Center languages at the bottom. So 7? And I'm not exactly sure how all of those are derived, because you can take BP10 in Dutch, but you can in French, which geographically, numerically doesn't make much sense. But we must have had a big project in the Netherlands, and somehow we have Dutch at the bottom of the Strength Center. So really good question. Not all the background materials and supporting materials are in those languages, but the assessment and the report are functional in all, I think, 7 or 8 of the Strength Center languages.
So I can take the BP10 assessment in Spanish today.
Absolutely. And you can actually take it in one language and toggle the bottom and get your report populated in all the different languages is kind of cool.
Perfect. Sangeeta, anything else you want to add as we got to wrap here? We're at the end of our hour. Anything else?
We flew by. Wow.
I know. We thought maybe 30 minutes today, and it never works out that way. Sangeeta, anything you want to throw in?
No, just have fun. Keep your questions coming. Let us know how we can help. Share your stories. That helps us become better and give out or create better things.
Todd, final thoughts?
Wow. A constant and very, very heartfelt thanks to the coaches. They're driving this science. I hear the stories and it's energizing because we've had to invoke a little determination and some confidence on this initiative as we've got it started up. So bravo to the coaches. I do employ them to beg of them, I should say, to get a few of these student systems up in your cities. They're fun. It's so much fun to watch the parents celebrate something that no one else celebrated in a kid. Those of us that are parents know if you want to wind up a parent, wind up and celebrate their kid. And that happens a lot during these student activities. It's just great fun. And let's just keep building and keep changing the dialogue from what do you do to what do you build. And as everybody knows, I love this topic and we'll jump on a phone call with absolutely anybody on any related topic at any time. So we'll keep, we've only got 250 coaches, so it's very manageable. We're a small but mighty group.
All right.
And half showed up for today's call, which is a record.
It's pretty good. Pretty good comments in the chat room. Appreciate that. If you have any questions post this, you can send us an email, coaching@gallup.com. We'll remind everyone to take full advantages of all the resources we have available out there. We mentioned GallupStrengthsCenter.com. Don't forget, like Todd said, there's actually a bunch of links at the bottom of the page at Gallup Strength Center. All the languages, all the FAQs, all the help links, those are there. I think sometimes people forget I answer about 95% of the questions we get in the community right off those links. So if you have questions, just go Gallup Strength Center, navigate to the bottom of the page. It's probably all right there for you. If you can't find it, send us an email, coaching@gallup.com. If you're interested in becoming BP10 trained or any questions around the training we have available for you, you can get access to that, courses.gallup.com. We mentioned in the pre-show, we have the CliftonStrengths Summit that's coming up. It may be gone by the time you listen to this if you do it in a time-shifted manner, but CliftonStrengthsSummit.com. We haven't announced the 2019 training yet, but it will be coming here shortly. Oftentimes you get a discount around the summit, and we'd love to have you come out and do that. Summit has moved this year to June, just for this year only. We had some conflicts here in the city of Omaha. Believe it or not, June and July are the busiest months in the city of Omaha, with a lot of things going on, including a College World Series and I think some Olympic swim trials this year. Yes. They are back, and so stuff like that. So we're getting out of the way for some of those things. If you want to keep up to date on all the activities we have going on our webcasts, you can now follow us, gallup.eventbrite.com. And of course, we have a special BP10 Facebook group if you want to join that as well. I think that's just facebook.com/group/BP10. We'll get you there. It's not very, very hard to find. We'd love to have you jump in there, ask to join, and I'll let you in as well. I want to thank you for joining us today, and we'll look forward to the next update. With that, we'll say goodbye, everybody.